The year is 1998. NSYNC tops the charts, Saving Private Ryan dominates the box office, GoldenEye 007 and Ocarina of Time release. It's an undoubtedly great year for media. But it's not all great. Ernest Joins the Army gets snubbed by the Oscars. Van Halen and Iron Maiden release what are their worst albums within a week of each other. Monica Lewinsky happens. Okay, I have no idea what that has to do with anything. And it's especially not a good year for the folks over at Bethesda. They're hot off the heels of their hit RPGs, The Elder Scrolls Arena and The Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. Games that were both met with critical acclaim. Games that had thousands of possible adventures to go on. Literally hundreds of things to do. The Elder Scrolls was shaping up to be one of the best franchises in modern gaming. However, the game that came out soon after became one of Bethesda's biggest failures and almost sent the company into bankruptcy. This is the story of The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard. Welcome everybody to Tryan Maiden. My name is Tryan, and if you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe or you're not making the chess club. Development on a third Elder Scrolls game was slow. They had to create a game that matched the expectations set by their predecessors. I mean, Arena and Daggerfall were massive, full of content, and were really easy to get lost in for hours at a time. But creating another game that built upon what they had created just a few years before, all while modernizing it for newer systems, was a daunting task. In order to compensate for the slow progress, they originally planned on creating a space game called The 10th Planet in collaboration with Moonfall director Roland Emmerich's Centropolis Entertainment. But the idea fell through. And you know, I think it's a good thing that they didn't circle back to that idea. Oh my god! With the third Elder Scrolls game still years off and a gap needing to be filled, they got to work. But before we talk about what they did, I think we have to take a look at where the Elder Scrolls came from. A lot of people seem to forget that the Elder Scrolls was not created by Todd It Just Works Howard. It was actually created by Julian LeFay and Vijay Lakshman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Julian joined Bethesda in 1987, just 1 year after the company's creation, and Vijay joined in '89. In the early 90s, the two come together to create a new game for the company, taking heavy inspiration from Dungeons & Dragons and Lord of the Rings, as well as the 1992 video game Ultima Underworld. They create The Elder Scrolls Arena, and the game is a smash hit, receiving high ratings from critics and a ton of awards. In 1997, Bethesda proudly releases the long-anticipated sequel, The Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, bigger and better than their last game. However, during Daggerfall's development, Vijay Lakshman leaves Bethesda, not for any particular reason, just to pursue other projects on his own. Alright, Julian says, this is fine. I'm gonna create an expansion for Daggerfall, continue me and Vijay's universe. Well, that Daggerfall expansion quickly turns into its own full-fledged game, the next entry into the Elder Scrolls franchise, in Elder Scrolls Legend, Battlespire. It's not very good. Battlespire is panned by critics, with many complaining about its buggy nature and lack of usage of modern hardware. I was actually going to include Battlespire in this video as its own segment, but I couldn't play more than 30 minutes of it. So, with many games being developed at the same time and deadlines approaching quickly, Julian LeFay decides to leave Bethesda. In a recent interview with IGN, they quote Julian saying that the demands on your time were extreme. People in the game industry really want to make games, and you can potentially exploit that if you're not a scrupulous person. That's why I left Bethesda in the games industry. With the original creators of The Elder Scrolls gone, Bethesda was at a loss. But one man rose above the rest to save the franchise. Todd, I'm gonna make video games and everyone's gonna play them, Howard.
Chess, I was in the Yes Club.
The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard was intended to be the first entry into a spin-off of the main series. The game follows Cyrus, a Redguard mercenary traveling to the Isle of Stros-Makai in search of his sister Izara. It was the first game in the franchise that was not directed by one of its original creators. That honor went to Todd Howard, a game dev at Bethesda whose first job was testing early builds of Arena. Details on the development of Redguard are sparse, but from what I can gather, Todd whipped the team into shape and really focused on making a smaller, more detailed world to explore. It was the first fully 3D Elder Scrolls game, and they really started pushing the boundaries of the engine that they had been working with. It also changed a significant amount of what was established in Arena and Daggerfall. There was no character creation, procedural generation of dungeons, or almost anything from what the first two games did apart from its setting. Once Redguard actually released, it received favorable reviews from critics, with some citing clunky controls as really one of the only drawbacks. However, the game didn't sell well. Todd was at a loss. Bethesda almost filed for bankruptcy in the late 90s after a company-wide downturn in sales. But with ZeniMax stepping in to pick up the slack, Todd Howard continued working on the third Elder Scrolls, and Redguard slowly faded into obscurity. So of course I wanted to play it. If I can be completely honest, I was not expecting much from this game going into it. I didn't know any of the history behind it. All I knew was that it was an Elder Scrolls game that I hadn't played. Booting it up to see a 10-minute cutscene was something that I did not expect. And then the gameplay started. Oh, we are in for the long haul, aren't we? I had so much to complain about when I first started playing this game. The combat was not good. At all. It felt so clunky and terrible. You can't map controls to your mouse, so I played the game with one hand most of the time. I appreciate there being dialogue in a game and the hard work that it took to record all of it, but there's so much of it in this game, and very little of it is good.
War is the continuation of politics. That's it, right?
Never saw her again.
Peace, Desert Walker. I must go.
You also can't skip any of the dialogue, so if you want to experience the full extent of a conversation, you have to re-listen to the lines once or twice. And of course, who can forget that patented Bethesda magic that's just all over this game. But through all of this hardship, the obvious glaring problems that this game has, I was having fun. I found Redguard to be incredibly charming. I found the story to be legitimately interesting. The retro feel of this game really sucked me in for some reason. It was so cool exploring this island with a render distance of like nothing. It's like coming across something in Minecraft for the first time whenever it fades into view. I mean, the gameplay wasn't great, sure, but the experience around this game was legitimately awesome. I got to explore this city full of colorful characters, wander through a deserted section of the island off limits and patrolled by guards with Easter eggs galore. I got to witness a dark, stormy graveyard full of the undead and hike through a beautiful mountain range with a largely abandoned town right next to it. And the game crashed. Yeah, the Steam port of this game is not great, but for what it is, Redguard was a cool game. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm genuinely interested in playing more of it, and I'd actually recommend it if you're a fan of the Elder Scrolls series. When you look at all the negatives, yeah, I can understand why Redguard was a commercial failure, especially when you put it up against all of the other heavy hitters that were released in 1998. But still, I think it's an important part of Elder Scrolls history, and it represents the last calm before the storm over at Bethesda, and is kind of enjoyable to boot. After the failure of Redguard, Bethesda worked hard to create their biggest game yet, The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. And the game is widely considered to be one of the greatest ever made, with many saying that it's still Bethesda's best work. However, I really don't think that it would have been as good as it was had Bethesda not experimented with Redguard. This was the first time that they focused on creating a detail-oriented world. It was also the first time that they really started focusing on the lore of the Elder Scrolls universe. Even though this game has been largely laid to rest, I think that its place in the importance of the Elder Scrolls franchise can't be understated. Basically, Redguard walked so Morrowind could run. Well, Redguard more so fell flat on its face so Morrowind could run. But still, I wanted to thank each and every one of you for watching. This has been Tryin' Maiden, I've been Tryin', and I'll see you all next week. Peace!